I'm sorry, everyone. We are doing the roster release video one day late because tactical manager had explosive diarrhea. So they say. So they say. Those are the rumors. I don't make up the rumors. They're saying I had explosive diarrhea. Actually, I totally made up that rumor. I did not have explosive diarrhea. I was in Brazil. We'll talk about that later in the stream. And I scheduled my flight to come back yesterday when US Soccer was not supposed to release the roster yesterday, but they did release it yesterday and they screwed me over. But anyhow, we're doing the roster release video today. So make sure to drop a like in this video, share it, drop a comment, whatever you want. We're going to do a full breakdown of the roster, what I like about it, what I don't like about it. I would argue this is the Berhalter roster I have the most issues with ever since he came back. And we'll talk about that soon. Also, I'll show you guys here the tactical manager jersey. Yes, we have a tactical. Okay, I'll show you guys right now. I'm wearing pants so I can stand up. Here it is, the tactical manager jersey. So we have the tactical manager jerseys ready. We're not going to sell them. They're not for sale. We're going to be doing a few giveaways, but we're going to have an event here in Orlando for the Patreon members, and some of the viewers and some former players will be there as well the day before the U.S. plays Brazil. So if you want to help support the channel and be a part of all the events we make and giveaways, go join our Patreon. The link to the Patreon is in the description of this video. Now, I'm not going to go on a rant here. I'm not pissed off about this roster. This is still a strong roster, but I do have issues with it. Oh boy, do I have issues with it. I'm going to talk about it right now. So why don't we go to it? This video is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, but more on that later. The goalkeepers for this 27-man roster, which is a pre-Copa America roster. It's not the final roster for the Copa America, but essentially is. The Copa America roster is not due till June 12th. So there might be some changes here and there. Probably due to injuries. That would be the only thing that could come to mind. If there are injuries, Berhalter will replace the player. And there's 27 players here, so he will have to cut one. Goalkeepers, Ethan Horvath from Cardiff City, Matt Turner from Nottingham Forest, and for some stupid moronic reason, we still have Sean Johnson with the national team in 2024. He's probably a great guy. He's probably a very cool guy to have around, but it just doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. I don't think Sean Johnson is like even a top 8 USA goalkeeper right now. And what I think should have been done here, this is my opinion, is you start to integrate young players early. Have them understand what it is to play a Copa America, what it is to be with the national team, what it is to be in camp. So for the third goalkeeper, I would just bring a young goalkeeper. And I understand you guys are going to say, what about the Olympics? Well, bring one of them that won't start. The starting goalkeeper for the Olympics will probably be Patrick Schulte from the Columbus Crew. That's who I would start. And the backup would be Gabriel Slonina. Maybe just bring Slonina here. He's in the Chelsea loan army. You could probably get him released for the Olympics, even if he plays the Copa America. So bring in Slonina. Just have Gabriel Slonina here. Now, that's the first thing I have an issue with, and I understand that it's not a big issue because Sean Johnson will likely not see the field. I sure hope he won't. But again, that's the first problem right there. Because you can start to integrate a player early, a young player, because that's an issue we had in the previous cycle where Berhalter wouldn't bring a young player early to integrate him. And then when the World Cup came up or some major tournament or whatever came up, important game, World Cup qualifying, that player didn't know the so-called Berhalter system. But let's move on here. Defenders, we have Cameron Carter-Vickers from Celtic, Christopher Lund from Palermo, which, by the way, Lund might be out. It looks like he had a muscle injury for Palermo yesterday. After the roster was released, if I'm not mistaken, and Christopher Lund could be out. We don't have an update on that while we're doing the stream, but don't be surprised if Christopher Lund is cut due to injury. Who will he bring to replace the backup left back? Probably John Tolkien or Dejuan Jones. Knowing Berhalter, it'll be one or another. John Tolkien from the New York Red Bulls or Dejuan Jones from New England, the New England Revolution. Then he also has, along with Christopher Lund, you have Mark McKenzie, the center back from Genk in Belgium. And then you got the return of Shaquille Moore. the arguably the worst player for the United States in the World Cup, one of the worst players in general in the 2022 World Cup. He is back, and like Nashville is shit this season in MLS. Let's put it this way: they're not doing good this season. I'm pretty sure they just fired their coach. I'm pretty sure. Sure, Shaq Moore isn't the problem, but he's part of a crap MLS team this season, and he wasn't good. He looked out of his depth during the World Cup. Shaquille Moore should not be with the national team. He should never be with the national team when it comes to a major competition like the Copa America with the A team. If you want to bring him to Camp Cupcake, so be it. I'm against Camp Cupcake anyway, unless you bring young prospects. But again, Shaquille Moore is here. And then you got Tim Ream from Fulham, the center back. Most certainly should be there. Chris Richards, probably our best center back that plays for Crystal Palace in the Premier League, had a really good season. Anthony Robinson from Fulham, our starting left back. Miles Robinson, the center back from FC Cincinnati. Not a big fan of Miles, but much more understandable than the inclusions of Shaquille Moore and Sean Johnson. And then you got Joe Scally from Borussia Mönchengladbach. Most likely the Dest replacement, but we'll talk about alternatives because Berhalter also said Tim Weah can play as a right back, McKennie can play as a right back, and so can Yunus Musa along with Joe Scally. So if you have those four options right there, why do you need Shaquille Moore in this roster? Why? Is he the vibes guy? Because in the 2022 World Cup, a lot of the vibes guys, they saw the field. And everyone, look, there's going to be a lot of Berhalter shills, apologists, and media members that are going to say, why are you worrying about players 22, 23, 24, 26 in the roster? They're not going to play. It doesn't matter. Well, those people said the same shit during the 2022 World Cup. They said the same thing. Don't worry about players 23, 24, 25, 26 in the roster. They ain't going to see the field. You know what? Don't even worry about players number 20 or 21. It's only going to be like 15 or 16 players that are going to play, so it doesn't really matter. Well, guess what? In the World Cup, Shaquille Moore played, Jesus Ferreira played, Acosta played, Jordan Morris played. So what? What are you going to tell me? Zimmerman started most of the games. If I'm not mistaken, Zimmerman started 3 out of the 4 games. So yes, I am worried. But going on here, we have the midfielders, and this is another issue I have, the midfielders. So we got Tyler Adams from Bournemouth, Johnny Cardoso from Real Betis, Luca De La Torre from Celta de Vigo, Weston McKennie from Juventus, Yunus Musa from Milan, Gio Reyna from Nottingham Forest, Malik Tillman from PSV, and then a very random inclusion that I didn't expect, Timmy Tillman, the brother of Malik Tillman that plays for LAFC. He's here. It doesn't really make sense to me. He is a good MLS player. He plays for LAFC. He starts for LA. He is a good MLS player, more of an 8, I would say. And this is where it doesn't add up for me. When you look at the options that can play the 8 or the 10 in the midfield, Luca De La Torre can do that. Weston McKennie can do that. Yunus Musa can do that. Malik Tillman can do that. Gio Reyna can do that. Those are 5 players. And just to be honest, Brendan Aronson can play the 8. If you really, really need it, he can play the 8. We saw that when BJ Callahan put him to play the 8 against Canada in the Nations League final. He was even drifting wide, marking Alphonso Davies. And there it is. So you don't need Tim Tillman for the 8 or for the 10. You don't need it with all these players. Just don't need him. It doesn't make sense. But what this roster does need is probably another 6. And you might be wondering why. Tyler Adams and Johnny Cardoso are brilliant 6s. If one can't go, the other can play. We are very well served in those positions. And it's true. But here are the issues that I have with that. Tyler Adams has played like 4 to 5 games the past, 16 months. He hasn't played much, or it's not, maybe not 16 months, like 13 to 14 months. He's been very injury prone over the past season, like more than a season. And Johnny Cardoso, he's been fairly healthy for the most part, but he has gotten injured quite a bit when it comes to coming to U.S. men's national team camps. But let's say Johnny even stays healthy, and then Adams goes down because he's consistently injured. You only have one pure 6 if Adams goes down, or if Johnny gets suspended or Tyler gets suspended. You only have one. So why do you have Timmy Tillman here when in his position, his role, you have multiple elite options? McKennie, Musa, Gio, Malik Tillman. Why? You could have just brought Leonard Maloney. Now, Leonard Maloney is not a brilliant player by any means, not a brilliant player, but he did start almost every single game for Heidenheim that finished mid-table in the Bundesliga, doing a lot of the dirty work, a lot of defending, very physical player, can play the 6 in an emergency if you need him. He can even play as a center back if you really, really need him to. So why is Leonard Maloney not there instead of Timmy Tillman? I don't get it. And Leonard Maloney is healthy as far as I know. He had a shoulder injury, but he came back for Heidenheim late in the season. He was playing. I don't understand it. But that's Berhalter's decision. And then you got the forwards. To close it out, you have the forwards, which would be wingers and center forwards. You have Brendan Aronson, Balogun from Monaco, Ricardo Pepi from PSV, Christian Pulisic, our best player from Milan, Josh Sargent from Norwich. Sargent that we don't know his health situation. He is dealing with an ankle injury. He could get cut. Tim Weah from Juventus, and then Haji Wright from Coventry. A couple important things here from Berhalter's press conference on the forwards. He said that Haji Wright is seen as a winger from Berhalter's perspective, which I honestly agree with him. Sure, if he plays Haji as a striker, I don't have an issue with it, but I agree with Greg with that. Haji is better at the wing. But then you have, so as a center forward, you have Balogun, Pepe, and Sargent. Sargent is dealing with an ankle injury. I could see him being cut, and that's another issue because if Sargent is cut, then it means Tim Tillman, Shaquille Moore, they're all going to be there. As I said, the Copa America roster is not due till the 12th, and Berhalter will cut one of the players here. But again, Sargent is not fully fit. Tyler Adams, who knows? I doubt he cuts Tyler unless Tyler is legitimately injured. If Tyler can play 10 minutes, he'll be there. But again, wouldn't it be better to have a Leonard Maloney? And you might be wondering, who do you replace Shaquille Moore with? Because, I mean, who's the other right back? Brian Reynolds is going to the Olympics, and he's also not like a brilliant right back by any means. A lot of potential, but not like he'll be the savior or replace Dest. Who do you replace Shaquille Moore with? And to that, I tell you, you bring an extra cone. You replace Shaquille Moore with an extra cone. You can use an extra cone in practice, and that would be more useful. Simple as that. Okay? There's the solution for Shaquille Moore. You just don't bring him at all. You don't run the risk of having to play him. I even prefer Yedlin over Shaquille Moore. At least Yedlin just looked like a bad player in the World Cup. Shaquille Moore looked like he wasn't a professional player in the World Cup. But those are my thoughts on that. Now, before we move on, I'm going to read the super chats in a second. I'm going to put a quick word from the sponsor of this video and the sponsor of this Tactical Manager jersey that I'm wearing, which I talked about. If you join the Patreon, you can get it in the event here in Orlando. A quick word from the sponsor of this video, Underdog Fantasy, and they have a new promo deal, so you might want to check that out. I'll be back in 1 minute. Drop a like in the video in the meantime. I'll be back in 1 minute. Underdog Fantasy is a fun game to play prior to any soccer match or basketball. Football as well. You know, it just adds an extra excitement to the game. And this summer, I will be playing Underdog Fantasy during the Copa America and Euros. You can download the app by using the link in the description of this video and use the promo code TMTV. Yes, please, don't forget to use the code. And let me tell you why. Sign up with the code TMTV to claim your special pick plus a first-time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. The game I mainly play is called Pick'em. I just click on it, scroll to the soccer section, and pick a player for the specific match and select the stats that I believe will be lower or higher. It's very easy to play, but be smart about it because it's not that easy to win. I'll also be playing some Underdog Fantasy during some match live streams during the Copa America and Olympics, posting my picks on X and Instagram, so you must stay tuned for that as well. And once again, I'm a professional hater, so usually I pick anything that will have me rooting for the downfall of that player. With that said, once again, thank you Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring the channel. The link to play is in the description of this video, and the promo code once again is TMTV. Thank you Underdog Fantasy. And again, this is the tactical manager jersey right here that we're going to have in the event here in Orlando, Florida, also sponsored by our dear friends at Underdog Fantasy. If you join our Patreon, the link is in the description of this video. We will be giving this jersey for everyone that attends the event here in Orlando, and there'll be some former players. It'll be fun, and we do lots of giveaways on Patreon as well. And we stay in touch with our viewers. You can DM me there. So link to the Patreon's in the description of this video, along with Underdog Fantasy. And you guys, if you want to support the channel for free, drop a like. So once again, I'm gonna recap the roster here after I go through the super chats, and then I'll talk about it briefly. But we have a lot of coverage coming up. We're gonna be doing previews for every games. And keep in mind, once again, this is not the official Copa America roster. It can change till June 12th. But I would be surprised if there are any changes besides one cut due to it being a 26-man roster and there's 27 players here, or if someone is injured and not able to go. So the super chats here. Javier is saying thoughts on Rafael on Brazil's roster. The goalkeeper, I don't think it matters too much for Brazil. And that was a late inclusion, I believe, because Ederson got injured, if I'm not mistaken, from Manchester City. But we'll be covering Brazil in the Copa America as well. We'll be covering Brazil here, live watch-alongs as the Copa America goes. So you'll hear a lot about Brazil in the month of June. Cole said, Brian McBride said Shaq Moore is our best 1v1 defender. Okay, Brian McBride. If he's one of the best 1v1 defenders that we have, and we have some pretty freaking good players in Europe, good defenders, I wonder why he's playing MLS for a team that's not doing well, by the way, this season. Thiago Martins is saying, hey, Tack, you're still in Brazil? No, I'm back in the United States of America. I'm back, and it's good to be back. I love Brazil, but it's good to be back in the U.S. S27 is saying, thoughts on Johnny at the 6 and Tyler as a right back? I wouldn't be opposed to that, especially considering the fact that Serginho Dest is not available due to the ACL tear. I'm not opposed to that. Tyler Adams would be one heck of a defensive right back. Offensively, he wouldn't contribute too much as a right back, but defensively, he would be rock solid. And he has played right back in the past many times. So Tyler has played. I wouldn't be opposed to that. Thiago Martins on saying some players are getting injured a lot. Bad luck? Well, it's bad luck. The schedule of soccer has become far more packed, I would say. They're playing more games. The games are more intense. So more injuries are bound to happen. It's part of the game. And let me see if I didn't miss anyone in the chat. But going through real quick here, the roster once again, I'm going to skim through it. I already talked about the issues I had with the roster. I'll talk about the positives. The positives right away is he called up pretty much every player that you should call up. Berhalter did call up. And it's kind of weird because we're giving Berhalter credit for doing the obvious, but in the past, he hasn't done that. He's made a lot of moronic decisions in the 2022 cycle, but all the players that he should have called up, he did call up. I talked about like Leonard Maloney and Slonina, for example, replacing those last few players in the depth chart here. But again, these are not players that are roster locks. And I see also people saying Trusty. Trusty's not a roster lock. I would have liked to see Trusty here, probably over Miles Robinson or Mark McKenzie, either one, probably Mark McKenzie. But at the end of the day, he called up the players that he should have, like Matt Turner is there, Horvath. And then you look, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Tim Ream, Richards, Robinson, Scally, Adams, Cardoso, De La Torre, McKennie, Musa, Gio, Malik Tillman, Balogun, Pepe, Pulisic, Sargent, Weah, and Haji. I know. We're giving this dude credit for doing the most obvious thing in the world, which is calling up the players I just listed. But don't forget how shit he was in the first cycle with call-ups and rosters. Julian Viva is saying, why isn't Trusty called? I don't know. Berhalter might not trust him. I understand that Austin Trusty was part of the worst Premier League side ever, at least the worst defense. They conceded the most goals. They broke the record. And hey, a record is a record, but it was a bad record. But I still think a player being challenged at that level, and Trusty will probably be good in the championship next season for Sheffield. I still think he should have been called in over Miles or McKenzie. Probably McKenzie. I know this might surprise many. I do think Miles is probably better than Mark McKenzie. Even though McKenzie is in Europe, I do think Miles is a better player. But here's the thing. Berhalter was going to call up Zimmerman. He implied in the press conference that Zimmerman is not there because he's not fit due to injury. And then he went on to say that Zimmerman is being considered as one of the overage players for the Olympics. So Zimmerman might go to the Olympics. Not a big fan of that, but it is what it is. But going through this roster real quick once again before we go, and then I'm going to give it a rating. And then you guys let me know in the comment section of this video when I close it. Let's rate this roster from 1 to 10, 5 being average. So the goalkeepers, once again, Ethan Horvath from Cardiff City, Sean Johnson, Matt Turner. Then you got Cameron Carter-Vickers from Celtic, Christopher Lund from Palermo, Mark McKenzie from Genk, Shaquille Moore from Nashville, Tim Ring from Fulham, Chris Richards from Crystal Palace, Anthony Robinson from Fulham, Miles Robinson from Atlanta, and then Joe Scally from Borussia, not Dortmund. Again, Sergiño Dest is out injured with a torn ACL. That's why he's not in this roster. Austin Trusty was just snubbed. He's not there. Midfielders, Tyler Adams from Bournemouth, Johnny Cardoso from Real Betis, Luca De La Torre from Celta de Vigo, Weston McKennie from Juventus, Yunus Musa from Milan, Giovanni Reina from, I guess, he's no longer a Nottingham Forest player, so maybe Gio Reyna from Borussia Dortmund, Malik Tillman from PSV, Timmy Tillman from LAFC. Again, Timmy Tillman shouldn't have been there. Neither should have Shaquille Moore and Sean Johnson. Forwards, Brendan Aronson from, I guess, Leeds. He's leaving Union Berlin. Union Berlin announced that Brendan Aronson ain't staying. So Brendan Aronson from Leeds. Floating Balogun from Monaco, Ricardo Pepi from PSV, Christian Pulisic from Milan, Josh Sargent from Norwich, Tim Weah from Juventus, and Haji Wright from Coventry. I'm going to rate this roster. I'm going to give it, I think it's fair to give it an 8.5 out of 10. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. I have issues with those 3 players that I mentioned. Outside of that, for the most part, Berhalter called up what should have been called. I do think he should have integrated some of the young players already instead of like Tim Tillman, instead of Shaquille Moore, instead of Sean Johnson. Not a big fan also of McKenzie. So I think those are the 4, but overall, this is a good roster. I understand that a lot of it picks itself, but I'm going to give like an 8.5 to this roster. It's a strong roster, and there should be no excuses this summer for us playing a poor Copa America, poor friendlies before the Copa America. And again, this is, look, Berhalter has been getting opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to pull a massive result, to get something done at some point. This is another opportunity he's going to get with this very strong roster with experienced players, some players hitting their prime, some players in form, very good players, to pull a result at home in the Copa America. This is a teaser for the 2026 World Cup. So there are no excuses. Get the job done. You have the players. The United States has one of the best rosters in the Copa America. I would argue we're probably top 5 in that sense because you have Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. They're clear of the U.S. And then after that, on paper, we're there with Colombia, Ecuador as number 4, 5, 6. There are no excuses for Berhalter. Get the job done. And even if we play Colombia in the quarterfinals, you're playing at home. This is a very good Colombian side in good form. Get the result. You're playing at home. There are no more excuses for Berhalter. Seriously, getting to the quarterfinals and losing will be a failure. Sure, you're going to go, oh, we're going to play against Brazil. Well, try to top the group. I know we're playing Uruguay, but try to top the group. You're playing at home. If you can't pull an upset or get something done in the Copa America at home, how are you going to do it in 2026? But again, the roster ain't perfect, but it's still a good roster. I give it an 8.5 out of 10. And then Julian Viva is saying, do you think if a prospect does well in the Olympics, he can get a transfer to Europe? I don't think any Olympic performance from a U.S. men's national team prospect will play a role on the player getting a move to Europe. In the past, World Cups, short tournaments played a role because it was much tougher to scout a player. Nowadays, they just literally scout the player based on their club performances, which gives you a much larger data on that specific player. And what the Olympics can do is if a prospect does well, it can catch some of the scouts' attention, and then they'll go scout him at the club level. That's what will happen. They'll go watch him play for his club and see how he does. He's not going to get a move because the Olympics, but the Olympics can get a scout's curiosity on that player. Now, everyone, before I close the stream, do you guys want me to talk briefly about my experience in Brazil? I was introduced actually to Endrick, Abel Ferreira, the Palmeiras training facilities. It was pretty cool. Do you guys want me to talk about it before I close the stream? This is it for the roster. We also have a Olympic roster prediction video coming out this week. We have a lot of content coming up. We're going to ramp up the content as time goes on. And so in Brazil, going through it very briefly, very summarized, we were talking to a Palmeiras director. I can even put the picture here on screen that we met Endrick. And what happened was they gave me tickets on their VIP seats. It was great to be there. They also gave me, it's funny because they treated me better than any MLS team, even though some MLS team has been great. So I met Endrick. That's the picture on screen. They took me to the whole Palmeiras training facilities, which I got to see. I took pictures of some things which I can post on Instagram, so you guys can go follow us on Instagram. But I wasn't able to take pictures. Like, they took me into Abel Ferreira's office, the coach. So I was able to see the preparation for the Del Valle game, for example, a lot of the approach that he had, the ideas that he had, the scouting. It's funny that it's interesting that I was able to learn a lot from like 2 hours that I was there of how this guy prepares for the game, the Palmeiras coach, and obviously not in details, but just everything about that, all the work that goes into preparing for that game, the phases of play that he had, all the contingency plans that he had for each game. It was quite remarkable. I learned a lot. It was fun to see the whole training facilities of Palmeiras. It was good to get to know Endrick in person, Abel Ferreira, great people. So I'm very thankful to Palmeiras for everything they did for me there. And it was worth it. I also got these jerseys there that we're going to be using on the Patreon event here in Orlando. So if you want to be a part of it, join our Patreon. If not, drop a like in this video. And then I'm going to close the stream here before we go. Queen Nadra saying, would Xavi or Hansi Flick be a good fit for the U.S. men's national team? Xavi, no. He's very like system-oriented, right? Positional play, Barcelona. I don't think that would be good for the U.S. men's national team. I don't know enough about Hansi Flick to comment on that. But again, we have Greg Berhalter. So would Xavi or Hansi Flick be better options than Berhalter? Yes, they have far more experience at a higher level. So yeah, I mean, would they be a good fit? You're asking that. Would they be a good fit? Not sure. Would they be better than Berhalter? Yes, absolutely. At this point, but everyone, we're going to be doing a lot of Copa America content the next few weeks. U.S. men's national team coverage. After June 1st, we're going to be ramping up the content more and more. And I guess that's all. Drop a like before you go. And when I close the stream, oh my goodness, I almost knocked down my microphone. When I close the stream, let me know in the comment section down below, who are the snubs? Which players are missing in this roster, and rate this roster from 1 to 10. I'm back from Brazil. I am exhausted, but me and Dustin are back at work. We're going to get the videos out. We're going to get the Olympic roster out, the projected Olympic roster, and much more. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Don't forget to check out Underdog Fantasy. Link is in the description, and our Patreon link is in the description as well. Okay, I'm going to go get some rest and get back to work. Ciao.